Are you tired of isekais? Do you browse the Crunchyroll catalog and roll your eyes whenever the word another world pops up? Are you an executive at Kadokawa who needs to pitch 20 new isekais to your supervisors before lunch? Well, you've come to a place. Perhaps not the right place, but to an exciting place. Because today we are not looking at isekai tropes and seeing if we could make them feel refreshing by deconstructing them. This is surprisingly easy, because we can just go back to the past, before anyone knew what the heck Naruto K was, and take a closer look if we should bring back stories from years past. So go get your paper and pens ready, because today we will talk about the 12 Kingdoms. Spoiler warning for 12 Kingdoms anime, and small little thing about my opening paragraph, because you possibly raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the word deconstruction. We are not really talking about deconstruction today, even if you could make the argument that 12 Kingdoms really unravels some familiar isekai tropes, but for obvious reasons, 12 Kingdoms is not a response to the avalanche of Naruto isekai adaptations. Timing the market deconstructs the market, I guess. On that note, Sword Art Online is interesting, because it doesn't fit neatly to either, but it's still used as an example of an early isekai, but it's not an isekai. I wanted to mention that to be pedantic, and you know, I kinda miss Kirito. He didn't sexually assault anyone or become a slave master. We didn't know how good we had till the copycats started to flood the market. So what is this video actually about? Well, I think it would be interesting for us to take a look at how an older isekai title handles transmigration and how vastly different it can be, learn from it, and maybe look and analyze the new releases with new perspective. Only problem is that if you're an executive at Kadokawa, then you're not interested in that, but you're already pitching 50 new Exiled Out of Heroes Party anime to your board of directors. Maybe combine those two. I get a new skill every time I was exiled, and after 100 different worlds, I was unmatched. It's a mouthful, but it's pretty good. Back to 12 Kingdoms, and if you're completely new, then you should know that unlike modern isekai, the 12 Kingdoms is a portal fantasy. What's the difference? Think Narnia or Alice in Wonderland, where the method of transportation is an object rather than a supernatural or a godly force in the time of death. It's not a big difference, and you can definitely get away with calling 12 Kingdoms an isekai. The method they transport is definitely supernatural and not as dramatic as with Yoko and her friends. It uses the old folktale of Spirited Away, which you've probably heard of if you're consumed Japanese media, but I'm getting ahead of myself. What makes portal fantasies interesting compared to your run-of-the-mill Naruto isekai is that our main character's set goal is to find a way back home. That's because of the fact that during 80s and 90s we didn't completely hate our lives. The journey our old school protagonist went through was more of a coming-of-age story, where you go through trials and tribulations in the fantasy world and mature as a person, coming back filled with a newfound knowledge and perspective, ready to take on the trials of adulthood. Some isekai do that, but most of them do not because, well, there is no body to return to. The Rakushun saw to that. Another fact that there is a good mixture of male and female protagonists, which is rather interesting compared to today, when we associate isekai with garbage male power fantasies. Not all of them, of course, but if someone would complain about the state of anime industry today, the fingers would quickly start pointing at all of these isekai adaptations. Contemporary female transmigrators tend to be relegated to the villainous media, but of course there are exceptions. I've built this groundwork up because Yoko is a great character, and if you've seen only few episodes, you must be scoffing at what you just heard. Yuko at the start of 12 Kingdoms is a timid, people-pleaser, and unpopular girl who after the events of episode 1 gets stranded to this unknown world by a Kirin, Keiki, who proclaims that Yuko is the Queen of Kei, one of the 12 Kingdoms in, 12 Kingdoms, alongside Tsukimoto and Asano, who apparently is an anime original character, and 3 of them try to survive and make it back home. Well, I say 3, but it's more like 2 as Tsukimoto has other plans, but we will get to her later. What stands out Unlike your Isekai protagonist of today, Yuko is afraid and hopeless in the face of the unknown danger and known danger. Frankly speaking, she is a mess. And I'm not talking about the transformation she goes through when she arrives to this world. It's only thanks to earlier actions of Keiki that she can even fight back. She and Asano are betrayed, captured and attacked by the inhabitants of this world and the monster called Yuma. To make matters worse, a powerful enemy, the King of Ko, is after her head because, well, I'll let him say it.
あちらでは子供は女の腹から生まれるのだぞ。
それが何だというのですか。
得体の知れぬ者にこの世界を侵されてよいのか。
主長。
Did you catch that part? First time I watched this, I had to pause the episode and just let this world-building revelation simmer a bit. What do you mean the way she was born is monstrous? Wait, how are people born in this world? The world-building is frankly excellent, as I already have more questions outside of how people are born here, like, why did Yoko go through her transformation? Why can she understand the language and other Japanese transmigrators can't? Oh yeah, I didn't mention, we meet up with multiple Japanese transmigrators during the series, and it just raises the questions, why are they, well, here? I'm also happy to tell you that all of these have answers. Heck, the amount of transmigrators is actually addressed in the story. Back to our red-haired Yoko. Her character arc is excellent. The first arc, Shadow of the Moon, the Sea of Shadow, is coming to terms that she is part of this world, and she needs to survive in order to take up the mantle of Queen of K, and to ensure that the lives of the people of K are saved. But the early timidness and cowardice doesn't magically go away once she sits top of the golden throne. Oh yeah, all the arcs have cool names. Not as cool as our best rat boy Rakushun though. If you watch this show and don't like Rakushun, then we can't be friends. There are interesting grand politics, interwoven character drama, and cunning villains who give Yuko and other main characters more than they bargained for. But I think it's best experienced yourself. What I really want to talk about is how 12 Kingdoms seemingly deconstructs a lot of the common isekai tropes we see today. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not a response to the avalanche of bottom-barrel drivel that is self-published modern isekais, but it's a useful lens to look back to the past and see how refreshing some of these story decisions are, and it might make you question why modern isekais don't expand upon these ideas. I name-dropped Tsukimoto a couple of paragraphs ago, so that's a good place to start. Tsukimoto, alongside Yuko and Asano, are swept to this new world, with nothing but vague notion on what to do. While Yuko and Asano are understandably concerned about their new one-way flight, Tsukimoto sees this as her destiny. In her mind, she is obviously the chosen hero that has been summoned to this world to be its savior and constantly clashes with Yuko and Asano on what to do. She obviously wants to stay here and fulfill her sacred duty. There is no tension here. The audience, Yoko, Asano, and all other characters know that Tsukimoto is not the chosen one, but the first main villain, the King of Ko, Cho, is more than happy to feed Tsukimoto's delusions. All she has to do is to kill that monstrous being called Yoko. Now obviously Tsukimoto fails, and Cho's reward for her is less than she imagined, but on the journey, Tsukimoto begins to doubt herself and the words of King of Ko, as if she truly is this world's savior. By the end of the first arc, Tsukimoto grows out of her delusions and mends her relationship with Yoko, and as for her reward, she gets to go back home. Hey look, a Portal fantasy character who matures through her journey and returns back to her home world. Haven't seen those in a while. While her journey has been going on, Yuko on the other hand decided to stay in this new world and ascend as the Queen of K. It's quite interesting how Yuko's and Tsukimoto's main goals flipped throughout the first arc. Her story does not end here, as she plays a part in the next arc, Sea of Wind, Shore of the Labyrinth, where she interacts with Kaname Takasato back at her home world. I guess our world. Takasato is also a person who was spirited away to this world, but he returned even before our story started. The second arc, while giving us juicy world-building details on how Kirin are born, and how they choose their ruler, which begs the question, are you the Queen of K because Kirin bowed to you? Or did a Kirin bow to you because you are the Queen of K? So I began to think back to all of the Isekai I've read and watched. Why does our main character know the language of this world? What are we? Birdiving? Honestly, good job me, because that is a good question, and 12 Kingdoms is not alone in that. Executioner and her way of life has a world that had so many past transmigrators that they saved the culture of the new world and made Japanese the default language, which, now that I've typed that out, made me realize that Executioner is a show about colonized people fighting against their colonizers. Another example is in Bean Counter. In the recently released OVA episode, they made a point how the summoning circle has a magical sign that lets the summoned transmigrator understand their language. Very interesting facts. But language could be used as a source of conflict. Outside of 12 Kingdoms, the two examples I think of are Nothing Can Be Understood, where the whole point is that our main character is trying to learn the language. And another example is... what was it called again? I forgot. The main character was exploited and tricked by her party because she couldn't understand the language. Life in Another World as a housekeeping maid. That was it. I'm sure there are others, and I wish Isekai would explore that aspect more. If a goddess gives you the gift of understanding the native language of the Isekai world, then why not all the language in that world? Is it the only language? If there is some ancient text that no one can read, then why can't the transmigrated hero? Or did the goddess give the hero knowledge of the only most common language? What a dick. All this talk about language and multiple Japanese people being whisked away to this land leads us to a rather surprising observation. 12 Kingdoms is pro-immigration. Not only does it show other kingdoms trying to treat refugees with cordiality, because that is what a good ruler does. You also want to be a good ruler, because, well, we will get to that later. One of the interesting world-building facts is that because these transmigrators are so frequent, the Kingdom of N has set up an entire government branch whose job is to offer language classes, money and housing for these Japanese transmigrators. Like the only other example I can think of is Executioner's Way of Life, and in there, the Japanese transmigrators only get a job as a knife holster. Honestly, if you can name a narrow Isekai that does anything similar to 12 Kingdoms in this regard, then leave a comment below. I want to know. Most of this might fly over your head, because you're still hung up with the fact, wait, how are people born in this world? Well, they grow on trees. That's right, people don't fall far from the apple tree here, unless they get whisked away to be born in Japan. Yes, that's right, it's an Isekai Inception, where a person can grow in a tree, get born in Japan, and then spirited away back to this world. This is why Yuko went through that transformation and why she can speak the language. She was supposed to be born in this world. You might also have a follow-up question. Hey, since women don't need to go through pregnancy and childbirth, does that mean that the 12 Kingdoms is equal opportunity world? Well, yes and no. There are female warriors and rulers, and no one questions their merit because of their gender, but there is still prejudice because even in this tree-based birth, some people are born different. Hanyu are people who are half beast, half human, and in some kingdoms they face discrimination, but they are still people, like our best boy Rakushun. Oh, by the way, all the animals also grow from these trees, so you can pray for a family dog. This is such a cool concept. You know what's not a cool concept? Slavery. Most of the time it's not a cool Isekai trope either, and 12 Kingdoms has its well... To defend 12 Kingdoms a bit, it's always depicted as a horrible outcome. Early in the story, our gang actually are in a serious danger when a person they trust plans to sell them to a brothel to be slaves, working as prostitutes. Slavery is a real threat that our characters face. Usually when we have slavery in Isekai stories, it's always our main lead bind a beast girl or a fallen noble, and if you're lucky, then it's depicted as horrible, but an action that is a last resort for our main lead. It gets terrible when slavery is never mentioned again, and that's just not good storytelling. But it could be worse. You could have your characters justify slavery because how good of a master our main lead is. None of that sit here, and I must say, I do struggle to name a Naruto Isekai protagonist to whom there is a real threat that they end up as a slave. Maybe reincarnated as a sword, but I must confess that I'm not familiar with it. Last thing I want to leave for you, before we move on to the conclusion, is that 12 Kingdoms repeatedly critiques power and those that hold it. Leaders can be benevolent, but they're not above paranoia and fear of losing their power. Those familiar with Chinese history or stories might be familiar with the term Mandate of Heaven, and here it's called Tenchoku. Rulers must abide by its rule, or they will soon find their kirin succumb to a deadly disease and lose their right to rule, and soon their head will split from their body. Kirin cannot disobey their ruler even if they are delirious or completely in the wrong, and the show explores this relationship frequently. What I really like about the critique of power in 12 Kingdoms is that it makes it clear that ignorance is not an excuse. One of the most shocking moments is when we follow Shoukei, a princess who was sheltered from the plights of her father's kingdom, who was rounding up anyone who he deemed to be a traitor. Her reality shatters when a rebellion reaches the palace quarters and she witnesses her father's dismembered head and the killing of her mother. She gets to live as a peasant, and the show doesn't shy away from depicting how despised her father was whenever people find out who she is, and it's not like they're wrong. She is one of the best characters in this series, and if it wasn't for Yoko, then she would be my favorite. One of the pitfalls that 12 Kingdoms, in my opinion, avoids is that it doesn't say if the bad monarch in power is replaced with a good monarch, then the system is fine, which a lot of Isekai, especially my beloved villains genre, really struggle with. A lot of modern people are way too comfortable with absolute rulers and slavery once they get into position to benefit from it. So what does Yuko do once she becomes a ruler? Yuko ends her anime arc with a declaration of her first degree that will make everyone a bit more equal in her kingdom. It is not perfect, and to call it a constitutional monarchy would be sugarcoating it, but it's a start. Her story is not over, but it's a shame that we might never see that conclusion animated. Don't let that dissuade you from watching the Kingdoms. Yuko's character arc is one of the best, if not the best, you can find in anime. That is not a hyperbole. It is that good. Anyway, let's wrap this up. For several years now, I've come to dislike when anyone uses the term better than its genre, which you see constantly with Isekai. It reeks of insecurity from the person who makes it. It's like they're ashamed to admit liking the said genre. Calling something a deconstruction is just a neat way to give the same argument. 12 Kingdoms is not without its faults. The last arc is painfully short and it's half-baked as a result. The visuals and animation can be striking and stylized, but you start to see where they cut corners, and you'd start to notice the panning shots real quickly. Also, Taiki's story also just ends. Thankfully, the writing elevates the story, even when visuals are just barely hanging in there. And I always champion that good writing takes precedence over stunning visuals or animation. I do make snide remarks to action anime community when they hype up a show or an episode, and it turns out to be the most gorgeously animated piece of stale bread you've ever seen. To be fair, I do this as well, as I will hype up a slice of life anime that has great animation and stunning visuals, but on a reflection, the content can be vapid. I wanted to make this video because I started to re-examine a lot of modern isekais when I was presented with this past treasure. Like, why doesn't Mid-Zero or Mitsoku Tensei have people born straight out of a tree? Cowards, the lot of them. Why settle for fantasy conveniences when the world is your oyster? Joking aside, watching this old isekai before a certain standard was set is an adventure in of itself. I leave you with this. If you want to write your own isekai fantasy, then instead of just looking at your contemporary works, look a bit to the past, because seeing a story do something we take for granted so differently It can really get you to look your story and its world in a completely new way. Anyway, thanks for listening to my ramble, and next is most likely another ramble, and after that it's Lily season.